Perfect, perfect. A lot of claps for you, Khaulat. I think right now it's time, actually. I just want to share my screen to go to the panel session. We're having an interesting panel with us today. We're starting 1 minute. First of all, well, Ben Davis is with us, right? Being the visionary force behind Illuminate, San Francisco nonprofit, right? Brings communities actually to create monumental art. Then you're going to tell us more about Ben. He has a bachelor's degree in political science with a rich background spanning design, media arts, communications, and civic infrastructure. And then we are going to have with us Isabelle. Is a Harvard Business School alum, recognized as one of the 100 most inspiring women. Isabelle's journey has been powered by one belief: education is the most powerful engine for opportunity, no matter one's sex, code, race, or gender. Also, she leads the Stanford Accelerator for Learning, the university's initiative to bridge research, policy, and practice in pursuit of equitable, scalable solutions for learners of all ages. Also, with that is Brian. Brian is a former K-12 teacher and college lecturer with a PhD in education, digital media, and humanities, and a master's degree in literature and cultural anthropology. He brings over 15, not over 100, 15 years of expertise and intersection. I mean, maybe everyone, right? Everyone, we put everyone together is more than 100 experience. 15 years of expertise at the intersection of education, technology, and creativity. And he's the Global Director of Education, Learning, and Advocacy at Adobe. And finally, we have with us Erik Brown, a former filmmaker from Kingston University in London, that integrates cinematic storytelling with strategic pedagogy to create digital experiences that educate and inspire transformation. He's an award-winning creative leader at Stanford University and has produced and launched hundreds of online courses for institutions such as Stanford, MIT, Harvard, Boston University, Wellesley College, and edX. Okay, I'll welcome everyone, Ben, Isabelle, Brian, Erik, to the stage, and Khaulat, also you're going to lead this panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. I'm really amazed by the panelists, and I'm excited for the conversation we're going to have. And my goal for this which is kind of my approach to every panel discussion I ever moderate, is to just have a natural flowing conversation and just chat. So this is going to be a chat. And we're going to talk about creativity and everything in between. And it's also going to be real and genuine, and which is kind of like how I've designed my questions. I don't share my questions with the panelists beforehand because I want to hear like your real and true responses, but it's not anything scary. Okay, so just to kick things off, I wanted us to like start with something that I thought would be very interesting. Can you share the most interesting part of your work? And is that related in any way to what you wanted to be when you were a child? Anyone can get started. Do you wanna kick it off, Ben?
Sure. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I know we have people from all over the world, some people from the Bay Area, but I have the privilege of running this art nonprofit in San Francisco called Illuminate. And we work on large-scale projects that really help identify the city itself, like create a sense of cohesion. So things like 1.8 miles of light across the sky on the Bay Bridge, turning a bridge into a canvas of light. or 1.5 miles in Golden Gate Park. That's a road that used to be for cars that's now really clearly for people, that's filled with art, including at one end, most recently, a 100-foot long sea serpent in a Rainbow Falls pond. Reviving a band shell where we now have hosted 700 live free concerts since COVID. Cultivating a new monumental art form with giant laser space cannons that sort of beam all the way through San Francisco in ways that are unimaginable, truthfully, and otherworldly, where we formally named our fog, Carl the Fog, as the artist of record on everything we do with lasers in the city, because we're just people putting photons through space. And I have a chance to work in ways that truly are the unimaginable future that Stuart Brand talked about that I'm living right now. And I would just add that I looked at, Laura's squiggle chart, where you're kind of going from this sort of path. I think I flipped that the other way around. I feel like there's been sort of lack of coherency and chaos, and mostly fear and so forth of my lack of intellect. But I felt a deep insecurity and profound insecurity about my own intellect. Even on a call like this, before I would have been so anxious, because all you guys are so bright and you can go so deep, and literally my mind cannot grasp that stuff. It skips along the surface like a stone and can't seem to go into the depth of things. And I felt really inadequate, but it was only through the verification of other people, like, wow, how did you see that possibility? That's amazing. I realized that I have sort of a spider web brain, that shit sticks to it indiscriminately, jingles from my childhood and nonsense and little bits of information and just pieces and fragments of history. But I've had to learn how to survive with less information than other people. And so I actually turned out that I really do see that I have conceptually interesting ways of understanding the world that are unavailable to other people. It's divergent thinking, not by design, not by choice, but just by dint of birth. And thank God I've discovered the thing that scared me most my whole life was the thing that made me most special. It was my greatest gift to bring to the world. And I didn't really even consider myself creative at all until age 40. I didn't do what I'm doing now until age 50. It's so funny. How do you start your career? This year, in just a few months, I turned 65, which in the old days was sort of the end of a career. And I feel this incredible blossoming that's going on right now. And I wouldn't have the courage to dream that I could do what I'm doing when I was a kid.
That is so beautiful. And I just love that you kicked it off that way, in the was very real and form. And yeah, I just love it. Okay, did you want to go next, Isabelle?
Yeah, following Ben is actually a really hard act. So, and hi, wonderful to see you, Ben and Brian and Erik. Just such a joy to be with all of you. And Khaulat, thank you for hosting this really, really inspiring sessions, a set of sessions. Really, really, I've enjoyed every moment since 9 a.m. So let me actually start with a story from my childhood, which Ben actually triggered. So when I was about 3 years old, there's a system in my native country in France where you go into early childhood education, and I had at that point of time I was what you might call late everything. I was a late talker, which at that age was actually quite concerning, and a late walker. So my parents, based on this entry into early childhood education, had me take a test. And this test came back and said that I had low academic aptitude. So not exactly, what parents want to hear at age 3. Anyway, to make a long story short, education literally, and especially the early years, will literally change my life. And so a lot of what I have done since then, not too dissimilar to Ben, is taking joy in this serendipity of careers, with maybe trying to have one arc that's very dear to mine, which is impact at scale, and trying to impact as many lives as I can in my very own life. But outside of that, really enjoying relationships, the serendipity of different types of fun things that I have done. Latest one was trying to write 3 years ago, which led me to writing a book, which was published earlier this year, which was completely crazy because I'm not an English native speaker or writer, and I had never written before. So anyway, all those fun things that end up, building a career that seem like you look at them and you make a story out of it of coherence. But in fact, there are, series of serendipity that line up toward maybe hopefully a prodigal.
That is also beautiful. I feel like you're all just so unique and have so beautiful stories, and I love it. Okay, do you want to go, Brian?
Sure. And remind me, the question is what about our job do we find most meaningful or enjoyable?
Yeah, what about your job? What's the most interesting part of your job? And is
Interesting.
it related in any way to what you wanted to be when you were a child?
Awesome. And I'll also echo Isabelle. Thank you for organizing this, and it's so great to be here with you all. I think for me, so my job at Adobe is on the education team. And so in K-12 and higher education, and even sort of alternative education learners, really helping them express themselves in new ways is kind of the high level, very cool job that I have. And we have obviously a very large team that helps with kind of the whole infrastructure behind that, from professional development to curriculum, et cetera. But really about creativity and self-expression. So very cool job. I think for me personally, I was the first person in my family to go to college. One parent, probably two, didn't graduate from high school even. And we're actually very resistant to me going to college. It was sort of a cultural thing where I grew up in rural Montana. So going to college was a big shocker for me, a surprise that I could do it. And I liked that surprise so much, sort of getting through the first semester. And then the next semester, I became an addict. I actually went to college for 13 years because I just couldn't get enough of that feeling, surprising myself. I mean, truly, I did an undergrad, 3 masters, an MBA, and a PhD. Just probably too much college. But that experience of just like surprising yourself with what you can do and something you would have never imagined yourself doing, I love that. And that's a very cool part of my job, whether I'm working with, seeing a classroom of 8-year-olds, and that student who's like, I'm not good at writing, I'm not a good storyteller, I don't have good ideas, and you just shift it. And you say, hey, instead of pen and paper, why don't you draw it? Or why don't you create a video? Or why don't you create a podcast? Like that early moment of, oh, I am actually good at this, or I actually do have good ideas. All the way up to, college students who are like, I'm a biochem major. And then I took this design class and I realized while I like doing science, I love communicating it. I love turning it into infographics. I love turning it into podcasts. Like that moment of surprise is probably the most enjoyable thing. And then internally, most of the team at Adobe on the education team are former educators. And so we're saying, yes, we're so glad you're former educators and you're pedagogues and you understand the classroom. Why don't you try a little marketing? Why don't you try getting the word out? Why don't you try running some events? Why don't you try creating content? And so, I mean, even PhDs at Stanford on my team are doing such radically different things than they thought they were going to do. And seeing that sort of joy and pride and being able to create something that looks, professional, and they think, wow, I would have thought I would have had to have a whole degree in this, but now I'm able to do it. That's what just like really lights me up personally and professionally.
Amazing. Another very amazing story. And I know Eric's is also just going to be as wonderful.
Thank you. Yes. So first and foremost, thank you, everyone, both panelists and participants, just for taking the time. A lot of the work that I do is sort of at the intersection of technology, education, equity. and access. I'm a creative director at Stanford, their digital education unit. And so for the last 3 years, a lot of the work I've been doing primarily is to bring Stanford courses to historically underprivileged communities across the country. Which is huge just because most of those communities have never had this opportunity. They take the courses, they're actual Stanford brick and mortar courses that we have turned into digital experiences. And then once the students complete, they get Stanford credit. Lots of ways that that's really, really valuable for students. A, just getting access to very high level content, but then B, if they decide to go on to college, credits are pretty expensive. And so this is an opportunity for them to make their educational experience just slightly more affordable in a lot of different ways. To be honest, I have had the privilege of working as a filmmaker in some of the most like exotic and luxurious spaces, from Europe all the way to Asia to the US. And while doing that, I've also sort of seen a lot of underprivileged, undersupported, under-resourced communities at the same time. So a lot of the work I was doing in London, I used to live, for those of you who know London, Zone 6, which is way out in the sticks. I had deer in my backyard, beautiful vistas. But I did a lot of work in Zone 1, which is like right down in the heart of London, amongst communities that were predominantly Black and brown. Again, just extremely historically under-resourced. When I left London, I moved to New York. I was doing the work again. My office was a block away from Wall Street, but I was filming in parts of the Bronx, parts of New Jersey, like Newark and Irvington, places that within the US would be deemed like murder capitals in relation to the size of their populace. In coming to California, I live right now in Silicon Valley, which is like a bastion of sort of access and influence and prestige. And so I've gotten to see all of these parallels. And one of the major through lines for my life is like access to education legitimately is what divides the classes, which divides the groups and the demographics. And so my sort of sole personal mission is just to make sure that as many people that I can possibly reach with high quality education in really engaging and accessible ways, like that's the work I want to do. Like the sole function of my existence is just to make sure more and more people have access to knowledge, because I do think that sort of shrinks the gaps between, again, just sort of different demographics. To be honest, I went to school to be a lawyer. I actually had no ambition to be a filmmaker, but in the act of doing the work, I went to school in New Jersey, 15 minutes away from New York, met up with a ton of artists while I was there, and realized that that was really where my passion was. And I think over time, this sort of lean towards equity and inclusion evolved, but I think it was always at the core of who I was. To be brutally honest, my entire family, parents and siblings, they're all academics. I had vowed at a young age I would never go into academia. Here I am, 12 years in, working for places like Stanford, MIT, Harvard. So much for that. So to answer your question very explicitly, Khaulat, no, this is not what I had intended from my childhood, but I don't regret it at all.
That is beautiful. And I think you still found a way to not do the academia in the traditional sense, but you still found a way to be creative in academia, which is amazing. Okay, do you want to kick off the next question, Erik? What does career fulfillment mean to you? And how have you managed to attain that in your work? And if you haven't attained it, how do you plan to do so in the future?
Yeah, so I think this is a twofold question. I'm at an age right now where I have to be pragmatic. I have a family, and so like definitely a career is something that provides a certain level of security and sustainability, growth. But then simultaneously, having done some of the work that I've done, I realize that impact is really important. I think it's one of those things where we often look at reach as being the number of sort of likes or follows you get. But truth be told, I think real impact is when you have someone come back to you, decades later, and they're like, hey, I remember I did this thing that you were a part of at some point, and it changed the trajectory of my life for the better. And to be honest, sometimes like not even hearing that is more than fine. It's sort of like opening up. To give a really concrete example, some of the students that I've created for, they've never met me. They've never seen my face. They've never heard my voice. I know their names. I know their faces. And 3-4 years later, I've discovered that a lot of those students who initially were like, oh, I have no ambitions to go to college, or I just don't think that I can get into elite higher ed, I've seen them go off to again, sort of like the Yales, the Princetons, the Harvards, the Stanfords. And though going to college by no means is a measure of success exclusively, it's still just like really promising to see the impact that you can have in these really sort of small ways. I'm a firm believer in 2%, which basically is if everyone in the world does their 2% to make the world slightly better, then the world just inherently will be better to scale, right? And so sometimes we can get overwhelmed in the works that we're doing if we're like, we need to do 100%, we need to do it all, we need to see the change right away. And like, that's just not how humanity works. That's not how change works. Sustainability within itself is a progressive act. And so I think, both within one's career, you should have that ethos. Like if every day you show up and you're 2% better, then by the end of the year, you're just exponentially better than you were the year before. And I think the work you do should also sort of mirror the 2% growth trajectory. And so like if every year you're helping 2% more people in this world, you're learning 2% more, you're helping others learn 2% more, in the aggregate, there's sort of like a compound interest for the whole society at large. And I think that's really important. To wrap out my answer, I do think that I have done that, but I'm still on my 2%. So like, every day I try to do just a little bit more.
That is such a beautiful response, Erik. Thank you so much. Do you want to go, Brian? I can repeat the question. What does career fulfillment mean to you, and how have you managed to attain that in your work? If you haven't attained it, how do you plan to do so in the future?
That's a great question. I like fulfillment instead of success, because success is usually the word that's in there. Fulfillment for me, I guess it's probably two parts. One, just like a sense of safety, because just like children's psychological needs, if you don't have that sense of safety, like nothing else is going to come from it. So, a sense of like in my career, a bit to Erik's point, like I have stability, right? Like I can pay the bills. I have a roof over my head. I can put a little money into my retirement account, like check the box, and then everything on top of that is gravy. I think this is probably reflective of the fact of all the different degrees that I did in my professional trajectory. I'm not a very good long-time planner. I've never been a person who's like, here's where I want to be in 5 years or 10 years. I've never really had a professional plan, which is probably why my professional career has been all over the place. I really don't have a professional horizon more than a year in front of me, which is why I've also never been like a ladder climber per se, because that takes like long-term thinking, right? Like, how am I going to get from here to there? So really, maybe this is just because I'm a little OCD in my career path. I kind of look almost day by day and say like, is what I'm doing right now lighting me up? And not enjoying it. Like I can be lighted up in lots of ways. I can find it really exciting or really intellectually challenging or really difficult, or like, is there something moving in me because of what I'm doing? I think some people could call that like a passion or a sense of purpose, but for me, that's how I feel fulfilled, when there's just a lot of energy being produced for me around what I'm doing professionally. And that's kind of my simple litmus test. And I guess to my point of like surprising myself, I've been very surprised about the things that light me up, right? Like I was a humanities and education person. I've grown to love a spreadsheet, like love budgeting, Like it actually really lights me up sometimes. I just kind of ran with that. And now, like, you know, across my teams, I'm often the one who's like volunteering to like consolidate some budgets and do some accounting because surprise, surprise, I get a little kick out of that. That's what makes me feel fulfilled. It's a very kind of instinctual day by day, probably not good advice to give anyone else besides me answer.
Well, I love it. That's usually what everyone runs away from, and that's like what you love to do. Okay, Isabelle, do you want to go? Do you need me to repeat the question?
Yeah, that would be great, Khaulat. Thank you.
Okay. What does career fulfillment mean to you, and how have you managed to attain that in your work? And if you haven't attained it, how do you plan to do so in the future?
Yeah, so career fulfillment for me is very actually connected to Erik and Brian's responses already. One is when I feel I have agency to add value and make a positive difference in this world. I particularly have enjoyed whether they are formal roles or roles that I created for myself, where I create new things that have not existed before. That's really where I feel fulfilled. So it could be creating a new unit, forming a new team, defining a new strategy, writing this book that I was mentioning. Those are when I'm in the flow. Yeah. And then the second thing that I'm still working on candidly, but is this notion of creating impact at scale for career fulfillment. So anything that where what I do professionally or personally, because the two actually are quite tied, where I can have an impact in someone else's life. So whether it's on the system of education and learning, which is part of what I do at the Stanford Accelerator for Learning, or smaller acts like supporting students or teaching. Those are smaller acts where I see that my little actions have impact on others, people, and unleash their very own sense of agency, creativity, and careers. So those would be the two things: sense of agency and aspiration for creating the greatest impact I can have.
Another amazing response. Thanks, Isabelle. Do you want to go, Ben?
Sure, sure. I mean, it's interesting to hear Erik's answer out of the gate because I can remember when I was in my 30s and I had obligations beyond myself. You know, I had a daughter and I put food on the table and keep shelter and keep things moving. And I was my career was kind of mostly defined by what I said no to. Not that there were a lot of offers for me to do things, but I knew what I didn't want to do. I didn't want to sit at a cubicle for 50 weeks a year. I didn't want to work for some big corporation that was just, basically the job was to make money for other folks. I wanted to do things that I cared about and was able to sort of walk backwards through life and keep figuring out what it was that lit me up as I started to do it. But I'm at a really interesting place now where, and I think this is an enviable thing that I hope everybody at some point in your life gets to say this. I feel like I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. I feel like I'm doing what I was actually kind of meant or built or constructed to do. I feel that the things I'm able to work on are not mine, but they're things that resonate through me and I can move into service to them in ways that manifest beauty that wouldn't probably exist in exactly that way were I not to direct my energies and find ways to bring other people with me on the journey. I mean, it's a really clear indication I don't do anything on my own. I'm literally unskilled in every single possible way. But the one thing I do have is the ability to tune into a vision, see the magic of it, and translate it into possibility. And create this constellation of belief around it where enough people start to think that not for any reason of gain, just for the gain of collective beauty, that this is something worth pursuing together, where we all sort of work in the sweet spot of their creative genius, everybody in the sweet spot of their creative genius, Brian, I'll be calling you, generously towards the common good, to something bigger than ourselves. And it is it is delight when you can do that with a group of people. And the last thing I'll say is that I'm at this point where the career journey is no longer an external journey. It's an internal journey. It goes the other direction. It is who are you and what do you really want to do and what is it that is calling to you at the deepest level, including not about accomplishments, but about the life you want to lead. There's one great quote, which is from a guy named Robert Henri, which is the object is not to create art. It's to be in that wonderful state that makes art inevitable. And so I don't even know if this is value to folks. Maybe it just is this guy's obnoxious and he's gloating, but I really feel grateful and full of humility and blessed that I can do what I'm doing. And I feel it's what a great feeling to do exactly what you think you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, to an extent, I feel how you feel. But I'm not like, how old are you? You said 50 something?
I'm turning 65 in 2 months.
65. I'm like, I'm not even up to half your age. So I probably don't have enough experience to give that kind of response. But
Part of it too, though, is just to accept the wisdom all around and with all humility. And the nice thing about, I guess, being older or working on the projects I do, which takes so many people into the sweep of them, is I get a chance to respectfully listen to ideas and tune in. And I don't pretend to be some mentor or great font of wisdom, but I want to be the Jimi Hendrix guy, which is, knowledge speaks, wisdom listens.
Love it. Okay. You're going to kick off the next question, Ben. Can you describe a specific task in your work that requires creativity and describe the process of completing that task?
For me, this goes back to that weird spiderweb brain. I don't know how the conceptual visions come into shape, but part of what I do, part of my practice for real, is I get lightly stoned and I bike through the city almost every fucking day. And I just look at the city as a canvas and I try and understand the sweeps of history and politics and districts, but also opportunities and where are the sort of pulse points? Why does Market Street matter in the history of the city? What does Sutro Tower mean as a transmission tower? What is the power of the bridges and the orientation of the water and things? And I let things land and resonate. And then I think the nice thing about me being on a bicycle, a little stoned, is there's some part of you that has to be absolutely committed to the moment. You cannot, for a second, forget that you're on a bicycle moving through live traffic with potholes and everything happening around you. There has to be a purity of focus. But somehow, when that operating system kicks in and I get across the whole city without even knowing how I did it, and I'm chasing and holding one idea, and I sometimes do that for a couple of hours going out over the bridge, I can complete worlds of sophistication. How do we solve this? Where if you could do that technology here, it's probably ways to do it over there. So who do we need to talk to? What's the permission structure? And there's this, it's sort of an openness that I'm able to get into right now. And then some level of discernment and then a moment of like, fucking go for it. Go for it now. Begin immediately. This is it. Who can you call right now to see if there's viability on this idea? And I'm super lucky to have stayed put, said no to everything outside of San Francisco for a decade. I get a lot of opportunities to work in other cities now. There is kind of a sense of a career, but I've consciously said no to everything and just made the choice as a thought exercise to stay put, go deep, and see if I can make a difference in the place I live. So that's a roundabout answer, but there is I think a lot of creativity just in staying open to the inputs that are coming in, the source basically of all of it.
I love it. Thank you, Ben. Okay, Isabelle. The question is, can you describe a specific task in your work that requires creativity and describe your process of completing that task?
Yeah, so a lot of what I do at the Stanford Accelerator for Learning is trying to imagine and create a world that doesn't exist yet. So transforming this future of learning. So a lot of it is creative almost by nature. And where I seem to find creative inspirations is when I'm able to connect dots across maybe unusual suspects. So finding a lot of inspiration in actually going into school settings. That's one of my favorite things where I actually come back and have a lot of ideas. But also listening to a lot of other stakeholders in education and then connecting dots on what this future could look like and how could we a lot of creativity as a result of that. In the process also, it's maybe more specific, but this is actually one area which I have been thinking a lot and I don't have good answers. When I was writing, so this process of writing a book, I thought a lot about trying to optimize for creativity. So in other terms, trying to think, okay, when I am more or less creative, and why. So I found, for example, that morning is much better for me after going outside, much better if I connect with others, much better. But I have not, and that's where I've been struggling. I would be curious from other panelists. I haven't, I found myself on some weekends doing all these things. So, going outside, having always, all these things, kind of, and then like literally blank page, nothing comes out, no creativity at all. And then some other weekends were like, oh, I have all these ideas. I wrote an entire chapter. Very easily. So, and I haven't figured out my very own pattern of creativity. I'm still looking for it. And I'm hoping for that my other panelists here have answers, but I'm trying to this is a really interesting question because I'm trying to, and maybe this question of optimizing is not connected to this process of creativity, and those two things should not be connected. But I've been trying to think when I am most creative, and it's not an easy answer for me.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm in the best position to answer that question, but I also think you don't need to answer that question. You should just go with the flow. And I think that's what makes us human. Like all of these optimization things that people talk about of, do this at this certain time because it's optimal. It's like you're human, and creativity is not having a structure. Or, well, I think it is. It's not like being irresponsible, but like just going with, and it comes down to like my story at the beginning where I just like go with what my heart feels like. This is what I want to like work on, and I'm just excited and doing it. So do is exciting at any given point. And I think like the reason why people have felt the need to just like stick to one formula is because also the kind of the kind of work that most people do also has a formula or a structure where they have to like work from 9 to 5, and now they have to think about how they can fit everything into like different times of the day. But if you I think that's also the purpose of this conference. It's like thinking about how you can redesign your career to structure it around the way you work. And for you, Isabelle, you're like the executive director of your team. You can design it however works best with your nature. And I think that's like that's like what I think, but other people might have ideas. So I'm going to let Brian go ahead and answer the question. Can you describe a specific task in your work that requires creativity and describe your process of completing that task?
Yeah. First I want to say, Isabelle, I have the exact same problem. It frustrates me that I can't find the alchemical formula for like why this works sometimes and not others. The metaphor I've just like adopted is, so I live in Santa Barbara, which is the weirdest little microclimate, right? It's like the whole city's kind of turned on the coast, weather gets trapped here, and my yard is filled with lemon trees and roses. And they're completely confused by the climate. So when there's going to be roses blooming and when there's going to be lemons, every year is completely unpredictable. Sometimes the roses will bloom 2 times a year, 3 times a year. I've even tried to like plan things like baby showers around when I think the roses are going to come and then they surprise me. So, but when they come, you see them in a house, right? That's when we have lemons and roses. And so I've actually just tried to say like that's my metaphor, creativity and inspiration, right? Like it's going to come when it comes. There's all these microclimates. I'm going to welcome them when they're here. Maybe by another 2 months, maybe by another 3 months, but like I can't control the roses or the lemons. I can just keep an eye out for them and then grab them and harvest them and like enjoy them. That's my silly Santa Barbara metaphor for ultimately just being very frustrated that I can't get creativity on tap. So my job requires creativity, especially creative problem solving, because at its core, the challenge is convincing teachers and parents and students and school systems that creativity is important, that it's not a nice to have. Creativity and creative thinking are essential formative skills kind of for everything in life. And it seems so not direct, right? Especially in K-12 where creativity is usually not in the curriculum. It's not tested in standardized tests. And so that sort of sell to a teacher who's like, I can go from A to B like this. Why in the world, when I have a crammed curricula and little time, are you having me go like this? And it's sort of like teaching the beauty of a parable, right? Which comes from like the parabola in geometry, right? Why in the world would you go like this to get from A to B? And the beauty of a parable is, like any parable, you could have just said the lesson, but the journey of going up and down is what makes the lesson whole and stick and beautiful and insightful and wisdom. So I often like embrace that parable in my work with schools where they'll say like, oh, we would so love to do PD on creativity. You know, we've got PD on our new learning management system though. We've got PD on this. We've got PD on these new science standards. I'm like, well, let's get parabolic with it. Science standards, you have science teachers. What if we talk about some of the new standards that they're working with and how creative thinking could help them hit those standards differently? Like, let's feed two birds with one scone. So we're like always like creatively trying to see like, oh, there's upcoming legislation around the importance of AI skills, but creativity isn't in there. All right, but I do see innovation is there and I do see problem solving is there. So, all right, well, what if we talk about creativity that inspires innovation or creative problem solving? So it's a lot of sort of going around corners in a way that, you know, instead of being like sneaky, I find actually kind of beautiful because that journey of going around it actually kind of leads to kind of some of the biggest insights.
Yeah, I love your response, Brian. Okay, just so we can stick to time, I would like try to but I feel like okay, no, let's stick to time. Okay, Erik. The question, do you need me to repeat it?
No, I think I have it.
Okay.
And so first, to sort of like Isabel's question, something that Brian said did sort of like spawn an idea. It's sort of like this idea of alchemy, right? And this desire to create gold out of metal, for instance. And I think sometimes just appreciating that metal has just as much value, if not more, than gold does. And so like taking all of the moments and sort of seeking the frisson out of boredom and, you know, routine. There's something to be said about that. Like there are great ideas still to be had and like creativity to be found in all of these different spaces. I think we're sort of like primed to believe that it's an elusive thing that we kind of chase after. And sometimes it is. And like there are other times where it's like when you least expect it, it's right in front of you and you kind of almost have to. I'm dating myself, but when we were little kids, there were these books where you brought them close to your eyes, and when you pulled them back, you could see the image that's hidden in there. And I think that's sort of what creative reality is like oftentimes just looking at whatever's in front of you in just a slightly different way than everybody else. I think to your question, Khaulat, anyone who's sort of been an independent creative in any way knows that when you start the job, you're like, I'm going to make art all the time. Like, I love art. That's why I chose to do this. And you quickly discover that 90% of your job is actually administrative. It's not creative in quite the ways that you want it to be. Right. As a filmmaker, you know, in any given time, if I'm doing production, 20 days out of 6 to 8 months is the filming side of it, and then everything else is sort of wrangling various stakeholders and financing and things like that. And I think the beauty, and similar to Brian's answer, is like there's creativity to be found in those less creative processes. So a lot of the work I do requires sort of like many stakeholders with very, very different goals and outcomes to work together and like to actually sort of see the perspective of the other stakeholders. And so you quickly discover that 90% of the creativity you're doing there is that you are trying to convince people that the best way for them to reach their goal may be to actually empathize with somebody else who they seemingly feel that they don't relate to or they don't have a shared vision. And I think that's really important because if you're a designer, if you are virtually any artisan, musician, whatever the case may be, you're trying to figure out a way to navigate large groups of people. And like, you know, there's that saying, if you want to move quickly, go it alone. If you want to go far, go as a group. And I think the reality is that all artisans at some point realize that they want the longevity of artistry. Like that's the beauty of it. And so you have to go as a group. And that usually means working with a ton of different people and that have different expectations. And so coming up with creative ways to navigate that space is really valuable. I think the other thing, we live in a world where art needs to be financed. You quickly discover the more you know your craft is the more creative you can be in financing it. And so like, you know, oftentimes we're like, we don't have the money for the tool. We don't have, you know, the money for the people. We don't have the money for all of the reasons why something shouldn't happen. And then as a filmmaker, you're like, all right, cool, we're going to make it happen still. And here are the ways we're going to do it. And I think that's probably not unique to filmmaking at all. I think that's probably a universal solvent for all creatives. To be honest, I think that's a tool that everyone has to have just in general. But definitely those 2 points of figuring out how to creatively navigate a space and creatively use what you have despite whatever challenges may sort of present themselves.
Yeah, I love your response. And it actually brought another question to my mind, a more businessy question that I'm going to throw at Ben. I want to believe you like and appreciate doing the art side of your work more. And given that you built this whole organization where you probably work with lots of people doing this big project, how have you managed to, attract people that can help you with this other admin work, and how have you outsourced all of these things over the course of building Illuminate? Oh, you're on mute.
The reality is I'm kind of mystified by that. All the stuff that you see our organization doing, at the end of the day, we're a salaried staff of 2 people. I'm one of those people.
Wow.
It's an incredibly, almost magically efficient organization in terms of its impact. You know, we reach 20 million people on an annual basis, day and night across San Francisco in a variety of mediums now, and are rallying teams together. Part of it, though, I think is, I think of all design as problem solving. What really matters to me always is what problems are you choosing to solve? That's where you're going to put your time and energy. So for me, the challenge selection is really critical. I don't have any way to reward people. I don't have a big checkbook. I don't have a cudgel or a way to punish people. The only thing I really have is the power to inspire. And that comes down to language and words. And I sort of think of every Illuminate project as the journey of 10,000 conversations, that I'm sort of spinning the knob on what is it that's going to get this project into the consciousness, or how does this project not modified in ways that destroy the integrity of the project, but only strengthen it and move it deeper into the essence of the shared desire to say, not only is this project inspiring to me, but I actually know that this can't happen unless I take action. But oftentimes I'm going into the maw of a bureaucracy that's literally designed to say no to things, specifically to beauty. It's not Caltrans' job to put lights on the side of a bridge. It's way outside the scope. This is in Homeland Security doesn't particularly like it. Fish and Wildlife has questions. You have all these entities and groups that are designed to stop things and to find a way to move into those and really find the language and the essence of the idea that I tried to post, I'm not sure if I got into it, the guiding principles of Illuminate into the chat. I'm not sure if those did that load. I can't quite tell if it did or not. But the first
No,
principle.
but you can send it after, and I'll share it with.
Well, the first principle of the organism, the mission is illuminate these large groups of people together to create impossible works of public art that through awe free humanity's better nature. And the first of the 10 guiding principles is be beauty bound, commit to manifesting beautiful expressions from surface to core. I'm more and more in what I do am a believer in the power of beauty in its own without even having to virtue signal in any way whatsoever. Something magical happens when we all gather around something that takes our breath away and moves us into a space of awe. And so, I think the projects I select bring people together because they know they have to help it, and they find a way to work on something bigger than themselves, and they want to do it and bring their specific skill set to bear. And that's when we're all at our happiest. We're doing what we're kind of meant to be doing, kind of in a high form. This is what we're great at, and we think we give our highest contribution. And now I can put lights on the side of a bridge, or a sea serpent into a pond, or lasers through the middle of the city. These are unusual things to have the opportunity to work on, and I'm just super lucky to be in a position to attract that kind of talent around me.
Yeah, I love that. I love your response. Okay. Has everyone been having like fun as much as I have? Let us know in the chat. Let us know if this is even resonating with all of you. How has this been so far? Put it in the chat, but I'm going to move on because we have like 10 minutes. Okay. So, I mean, there is no conference without throwing AI into it. So, my next question is AI related. So, ooh, sorry. What role does AI play in your work, and how do you balance between being creative and using AI wisely? So, Isabelle, do you want to kick this off?
Yeah, so we think a lot about the role of AI in this future of learning and education. It's such such an interesting technology that has some amazing capabilities for differentiation, which is one of the areas that's the most difficult to do well in classrooms. So for whether it's for learners with learning differences, for learners like me who were not English natives, or lots of other types of learners, it's a technology that carries extremely interesting possibilities. It has also obviously a lot of risks. So anyway, AI, to your question, Khaulat, I think about it a lot in my day-to-day work as both a potential catalyst to make our education systems a lot better than they have, and also think obviously about all the inherent risks that it could bring in terms of greater inequities, in terms of safety, in terms of ethics, and so forth.
Yeah.
But in terms of creativity, I don't think that your question is the right one. In my mind, I don't think about a balance. I think more about AI is a tool for potentially catalyzing actually great creativity. I love using different AI tools to make myself or empower our students to be more creative, or teachers. So yes, there are some risks of over-reliance that a lot of researchers are looking into at the moment with this technology. But if we think about it as a tool for catalyzing greater creativity, it's also magical, the things we can do. I'm looking at it for video making right now, Erik, where I may call you after this call to ask you for tips, but it's just incredible. I feel empowered to do new things, try new things, yeah. So for me, it's not a question of striking a balance. It's more like augmentation of my very own skills and competencies.
Love your response. Okay, Erik, do you want to go next? Should I repeat the question?
No, I do have the question, and I actually think Isabelle's answer is like spot on. I think the reality is number one, AI is a tool. And so without getting like wrapped up in all of sort of the headlining nature of it, if you see it as a tool, it's no different than any other tool before. You can, build with it really well. You can also do harm. And so I think to the latter part of your question, just sort of always making sure to sort of keep the human element and the ethical, sort of like an ethical standard at the forefront of how you use a tool, again, is the difference between building and bludgeoning. I think in the work that we do, similar to Isabelle, is this idea of like rapid prototyping. It's a lot easier now more than ever with AI to mock something up, to create an MVP, to be able to create something slightly more tangible to hand off to the next creative in line and say like, hey, this is what the vision is, and these are some of those elements that we're looking for rather quickly. I also think experimentation. One thing that humans don't do nearly enough, in my opinion, is like experiment. There's no such thing as a failed experiment, because at the back end of it, you learn something that will create the foundation for the next big learning. And so I think there's a world where AI as a tool, again, with sort of like an ethical backbone and a humanistic approach, you can do a whole bunch of different things, and you quickly discover sort of like a hackathon that you can take bits and pieces of learnings from all of the different experiments and create something foundationally sound later down the line. And so that's pretty much how I look at how AI sort of informs my process.
Yeah. Great. Brian, how do you use AI at Adobe? Recently I was on the call with Ben and he was like, Adobe is pronounced, because I pronounce it as Adobe, and he was like, it's Adobe.
I kind of like Adobe too. That works. Yeah, when it comes to creativity, AI, and education, I think one of the big questions is like, is AI going to replace creativity? And I think that question makes a lot more sense when it comes to critical thinking and other skills that are everywhere in education today. I would love to say that the education system is at a place today where there is so much creative thinking happening. We're at risk of AI stopping some of that great creativity and creative thinking that's happening in every classroom. I think, unfortunately, it's not. So while we do have to attend to that risk, in the spirit of being surprised by what you can do or seeing value in doing it, the kind of low-hanging fruit opportunity I see is students getting that creativity assist with AI. And in that realm of sort of Bloom's taxonomy of affective learning, one of the stages is like realizing the value of that thing, like knowing what it is, internalizing it, seeing it as valuable, and then being able to do it. I think giving students that opportunity to say, oh, wow, like I had never thought of 50 ways to do something before. Like, I get why this is so cool. Like where I ended up landing is so far from where I would have gone otherwise. This process is so valuable. How many students have the opportunity to do that once a year, let alone every week? Once you show that value, then you take the training wheels off. And then we have to design great platforms like Riff or the things that Conmigo and others are doing that are creating that productive friction, that are saying like, all right, well, now training wheels are off. Let's see what you can do. I'm going to challenge you. I'm going to help you. I'm going to critique you. I'm going to riff with you. The first wave of AI has been like, won't it be magical if I can just do everything for you? Every student I speak with says, I don't actually want that. Like, I want it to help me a little bit and then stop and let me do it. I want it to teach me a little bit and then stop so I can make sure that I'm learning it on my own. That's what I'm excited about when it comes to AI and creativity, like showing students that they can do these things and the value of them, and then actually stepping back and creating like true learning experiences in applications that are promoting creative thinking, and then researching it, see if it actually happens. Like, do these changes in interface actually lead? Because we can measure divergent thinking and things like that. Which platforms are actually helping students go from very weak ability and low confidence in divergent thinking to actually being able to come up with 50 unique and valuable ideas in, less than 5 minutes.
Yeah, I really love your response, because another core thing or core aspect to creativity, and tying this back to this whole fulfillment thing, is I genuinely see us creating things, and actually that thinking process of making things happen is what brings about the fulfillment. And we don't want to completely outsource things to AI and not deny ourselves that process that would actually make us excited and fulfilled about that thing. So striking that balance, I think that's why I also called it a balance. Because as much as the way you say it, use it as at the beginning to open the possibility and like, oh, this is what's possible. But then allow people to like build, and like the more we're able to strike that balance, we can like find more fulfillment in the work we do. So, quick question before we proceed to the panelists. Are you okay staying on for a few more minutes? And to the participants, are you okay with us eating into some of the mingle time? Okay. Okay. I want to see responses in the chat before I proceed. Okay. I can see Raphael. Yes. I see 2 yeses. That's not enough vote, but I'm just going to proceed just so we use the time wisely. Okay. So, the next very important question I have here is, Ben didn't get to talk about AI, and I would love to hear his response. Do you use AI in any way, Ben?
Well, let me answer it a slightly different way. I hear you, Erik, that it's just a tool, and a tool it's like a piece of rope. You can pull someone up a cliff or hang them from a tree. It has different outcomes. And so, intention matters. But I think it's more than that. I think it's a Promethean gift of fire. And for whatever reason, it's coming to roost for at least a brief while in the place that I call home, that I've been sort of spending my last few decades figuring out how to influence the culture of in sort of a larger way. And this is a city, this Promethean gift is landed in a city that has literally burnt to the ground 3 times, and it is gonna burn. And right now, the driving force behind it is from huge companies that all have existential dread of not getting there first, and it will be irresponsibly developed in ways that are unknowable to us. And it will not have while it alters the arc of human consciousness, it's not going to have much of an embedded consciousness beyond capitalism's drive. And so I think that San Francisco, the place that I'm calling my canvas, is actually the most important city in the world, the city of under 1 million people that is the people who come here, the people who make decisions here are making decisions that are going to change the way the world moves forward. And I believe that bringing some culture from the ground up, that encouraging people to come to San Francisco and sort of fight fire with fire, fight AI with AI, artificial intelligence with ancient intelligence, to come here, if you're a poet, if you're a philosopher, if you're a healer, if you're an artist, if you just come to San Francisco. I know it's expensive, but find a way, throw your bodies into the gears of this machine, throw your minds at this, and join this struggle to bring humanity quickly into this process of AI in the place that it's taking root. So it drives me wild with the possibility, but it also drives me mad with a desire to make a difference and get people to come here and let the humans really exert themselves, especially those who sort of have a deeper sense and understanding of humanity that is not about the moment, but it's about the great sweep of time. So
Then you just articulated my feelings in the best way possible. Yeah. So thank you. Okay, you're going to kick off the next question. When you look at society today, what change do you want to see? And I think you've kind of touched on it, but did you get it, Ben?
I'm sorry, say it again.
When you look at society today, what change do you want to see?
I think we live like everything's happening all at once, all the time. And I sort of think, it's all an illusion. Just pick the illusion that makes you happiest. My own coping strategy is to, in these sort of dark times, to have some agency to bring light into the world. And I think light finds its highest purpose in darkness. I think San Francisco has the ability to bring a movement out of it that is hope-based, what I call the hope punk movement. The idea that you're not hopeful in the way you cross your fingers, but you cross the line by taking action. That you believe that authenticity, that kindness, that goodness all have not just a place in our lives, but a meaningful force to bring those out into the world in a way that is generous, that is open to others, that is respectful, but determined to make a positive difference in the place you live by planting that flower in front of your house, by sweeping the street, by doing whatever it takes to make the world a kinder, better place, and let those values sort of crystallize here a bit in San Francisco and move profoundly out into the world, crossing the borders into the shared experience of all of us as being humans.
Yeah, love it. Okay. Isabelle, when you look at
I apologize, you guys. I get a chance to think expansively all the time. I come to calls like this and I'm like throwing boulders and shit.
And we love it. At least I love it. And I think everyone does.
It's where I get to exist. So thank you.
Ben, I mean, from AI to AI or the hope punk movement, that's like, those are like, oh, such gems. For me, Khaulat, my aspiration or my key concern right now, societally, is that we are more and more disconnected from other humans. And so I would love to see, whether it's Ben's work on arts, whether it's Brian's work on technology, whether it's Erik's work in education, all of us like working on, these, how can we rebuild our communities? How can we really think about a new type of relational infrastructure? And I feel quite strongly about this because all the science points to the benefit of being in human relationships. Is how we learn, is how we thrive, is such a huge driver of human flourishing, human well-being, whatever you want to define it. And right now we're not going in the right direction. And we haven't for a while. So, for example, we have fewer and fewer children who are playing in our streets or in our parks, or we have, fewer and fewer places where we get in community with others. We have even smaller family units. All these things that are interesting trends, but are not heading in the right direction from a human well-being perspective. So. What do I want to see societally? I would love to see more focus on something very simple, which is human relationships.
I love that, Isabelle. Thank you so much for bringing it up. That is also another articulation of how I feel. So that thank you again, because and that is why one of the main reasons why this conference exists. And towards the end, after the mingle session, I'm going to share with you some of our plans, because we don't just want, this is not a one-off event and we all go home and then that happened. But we actually want to build things, want to bring all of our skills together and do stuff. Now to share some what's next, what we can do next at the end of this call. So stay on to the end. Okay, let me Erik, do you want to answer the question? When you look at society today, what change do you want to see?
Yeah, I think for me, I'd stated earlier my mission, but I think distribution of resources. So it's accessibility. And when I think of resources, I'm thinking things like literacies, skills, tools, opportunities. People do their best work when they have access to these things. And I think to Isabelle's point, the more people work together, we all collectively benefit. And so like helping one person, I know there's some cliche around like, all boats rising. And sometimes that can sound sort of like an empty statement. But I do think the reality is humans are part of a massive intertwined system, despite what they believe or how they experience it. And if you can improve the situation for 1 or 100, just by default, collectively, the species gets elevated. I think one of the things we don't ask ourselves enough, what things are we losing as a species, as a society, when people within that same community don't get access to all of the resources? So what cures are we missing out on? What innovations are we missing out on? What improvements are we missing out on? The reality is that distribution of resources isn't equitable currently in society, and we're all losing as a result of that.
Yeah, thanks, Erik. Yeah, I'm gonna let Brian respond, and then we'll move on to my very last question, or maybe not. Brian, when you look at society today, what change do you want to see?
I've been thinking a lot lately about purpose, and the importance of having a sense of purpose. And I've like been deep diving into research around purpose. And if you look the past few years and the past few decades, sort of globally, there's been a sharp decline in people's sense of purpose. There's, empirical scales where you can measure how much does an individual have a sense of purpose in their life. So that's been going down pretty dramatically. The effect of that, when you measure people with a high sense of purpose versus low, it turns out it kind of affects everything in your life, right? It affects your professional happiness, and if you're doing the right thing. It has a direct correlation, especially as you're growing, with mental health and well-being. And actually, there's this really wild research around physical health. Vic Strecker has done a ton of public health work. People with a higher sense of purpose have lower rates of heart disease, they live longer, they sleep better, they have lower rates of cancer. I mean, it's sort of like there's this thing that's so important, and yet it's going down. And if you ask someone, what is your sense of purpose? Like, not only do most people not have an answer, they've never actually been asked that question before, or they never sat down and thought about it. So I guess the inner optimist in me says, like, right now we have this cultural moment that's pushing on this question of what's AI for? What are we for? What can AI do that we can't do? What will AI replace or not replace? And I think underneath that is like the really important question of like, what are we here for? What am I here for? Right? That like Billie Eilish Barbie movie song, like what was I made for? Like that is a really important question to be asking at this moment in time. And I think our relationship with AI is pushing on that question in an important way. If it's rising it to the surface and saying, all right, well, if AI is for these things, we want it to be for these things. What about me? Like, what's my sense of purpose? And creativity is, there's kind of like 9 big buckets of purpose. Creativity is one of them. And if someone says, you know what, one of my sense of purpose is creating things, making something that didn't exist before, putting ideas together that didn't exist before, you're not going to delegate that to AI because you know that fills your bucket. That's part of your sense of purpose, right? Like, yes, I could DoorDash Italian, but I love making homemade pasta. Like, sometimes I will, but like, I know that about myself. It brings me so much joy. I'm not going to let go of that. So if we flash forward 25 years and that statistics around purpose goes up and more people have a declarative sentence that say, yeah, my sense of purpose is this, I think we'll see people living more purpose-driven lives. Because how can you live a purpose-driven life if you don't know what your sense of purpose is? That's my maybe cheesy but very optimistic hope of something that AI might kind of rustle the dust on.
I think it's such a beautiful response and also the perfect way to wrap this up. Because I would want us to have a little bit of the mingle session. So now that we're all here, I want to ask again, if the speakers will still be on, and Jonathan, do you think we can have like a breakout room where we have like each speaker for each room and like anybody can go and can jump into any room? I don't know how that works, but is that possible,
It's
Jonathan? It's
possible.
possible. Okay.